At my daughter's birthday, my dad gave a toast about how proud he was of my brother's kid. My daughter sat there frozen as everyone raised their glasses. My mom whispered, "Your kid should have done more to stand out." I smiled, took her outside, and left the party she was supposed to be the center of. 2 days later, I had delivered something to parents' doorstep that made my dad call me in tears. You ever sit at your daughter's birthday party and realize your parents don't even see her as part of the family? That was me last Saturday, watching it happen in real time like some slow-motion train wreck I saw coming but didn't believe would actually crash. Madison turned 13, that age where she's not quite a kid anymore, but still holding on to some of that wonder. She planned every detail of her party herself, even made a little list of things she wanted to do. Games with her cousins, a special playlist she'd worked on for weeks, the kind of cake she liked best with chocolate on the inside and strawberries on top. It wasn't some over-the-top party, backyard, grill, a few lights strung up between the trees, but for her, it was everything. She made sure we invited the whole family, including my parents and Steve, my brother, plus his wife, and their 3 sons, Jake, Ethan, and Max, my parents' golden boys. I hesitated. I've seen the way my parents treat Madison, like she's some footnote in a book about her male cousins. But I agreed because Madison said, "They're still family, Dad. Maybe they'll come for me this time." She said it without sarcasm. She meant it. That stung more than anything. They showed up with gifts for the boys, not for Madison. She didn't say anything, just took the bags and put them on the table with the rest. She didn't even flinch when my dad walked past her like she was air and went straight to Jake, clapping him on the shoulder and asking about soccer tryouts. And yeah, I know some families are just like that. But mine, they made it an art form. My parents act like raising 3 boys is the pinnacle of human achievement. Every visit, every holiday, it's the same stories about how Jake is killing it on the field, how Ethan's brain is a gift, how little Max knows facts even grown-ups don't. And Madison barely a nod. She draws. She volunteers at the animal shelter. She's gentle and smart and has a dry sense of humor that sneaks up on you. But she doesn't brag. She doesn't perform. That makes her invisible in this family. Anyway, we got through most of the day. The kids played, the food was good, and for a brief moment it actually felt normal. Madison even laughed a few times. She was glowing. Then we got to the part where we were going to cut the cake. That's when my dad stood up. He tapped his glass like this was some kind of wedding reception and everyone went quiet. "I just want to take a moment," he said, lifting his glass to recognize something important. I remember thinking, okay, maybe he's finally going to say something about Madison. Instead, he said this: "It makes me proud, truly proud to see what Steve's boys are becoming. Strong, smart young men. The future of this family. That's what today is really about." He turned and looked at them one by one. Then he raised his glass. Everyone followed, even Steve's wife, applauding my daughter's birthday with a toast to someone else's kids. Madison didn't blink. She just sat there with her fork halfway to her mouth. Her name wasn't even mentioned. Then my mom, like she couldn't help herself, leaned in and said, "Your kid should have done more to stand out." That's when I stood up. I didn't say anything. I just walked over to Madison, put my hand on her shoulder, and said, "We're done here." We left straight to the car. She didn't ask questions. She just got in. Halfway home, she asked, "Can I do my birthday without them next year?" I told her next year was all hers, start to finish. 2 days later, I delivered a letter to my parents' door, hand-delivered in an envelope with my attorney's letterhead. It was a termination of their tenny. 3 days' notice. I own the apartment they live in. I bought it when Dad lost his job last year. Gave it to them rent-free. Never charged a dime. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family helps family, right? Well, family helps some family. Apparently, that letter was the beginning. I hadn't even gotten to the good part yet. The call came that night. I didn't answer. Let it ring until voicemail picked up. I already knew what it was going to be. Rage, confusion, maybe a threat or two. My dad always acted like he was owed something, like his authority extended past retirement, past failure, past logic. Instead, I waited. The next morning, I got the message. I played it on speaker while Madison ate breakfast. Franklin, what the hell is this letter? You can't be serious. We're your parents. We raised you. We're not some tenants you can toss out on the street like trash. Call me back. We need to talk. He sounded like a man trying hard not to sound desperate. But there was something else, too. Something I'd never heard in his voice before. Fear. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I never thought I'd hear that from him. After a lifetime of being talked down to, judged, dismissed, finally the balance shifted. 3 days went by. On the third day, they still hadn't moved out. So I sent someone a process server. Just to be clear, the letter wasn't a bluff. That's when the next wave hit. I got an invitation hand delivered a dinner at some fancy steakhouse downtown reserved under my brother's name. Let's sit down and talk this through like a family. It said Steve's name was on the bottom, but I could smell my parents all over it. I brought Madison. When we got there, the whole crew was waiting. Steve, his wife, their boys dressed like they were posing for a catalog. My parents, too, looking like they hadn't slept in days. The table was massive. Wine glasses already filled. Menus untouched. Small talk fizzled almost immediately. The tension wasn't something you had to feel. It was obvious in the way nobody made eye contact. Like we were all about to sit in on a trial. Steve started, "Frank, come on. This isn't you. They're our parents. They've been through a lot. You really think kicking them out is going to help anything?" I just sipped my water and let him finish. My mom jumped to next talking about family unity and how people make mistakes, and this isn't something Madison should have to witness. That's when Madison did something I never expected. She put down her fork and looked right at them. "You ignored me at my own birthday," she said. "You made a toast about my cousins. You didn't even say my name. You didn't forget. You just didn't care. And now you want something from us. So, you remember who I am again?" Silence. Not a word from anyone. Even I didn't say anything. I just watched. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was calm, cold, even. It was the most adult thing I'd seen in a long time. My dad finally spoke. "You're going to let this child dictate our fate." I looked at him and said, "She's 13 and somehow she's more honest than anyone at this table." Then I added, "You've lived in that apartment for 8 months for free." That was me being kind, but there's been no return on that investment, and I don't do charity for people who treat my daughter like a mistake. That's when the panic started to show. My mom looked like she just realized this wasn't a bluff. Steve kept trying to talk over everyone, getting louder and louder, but I just tuned it out. I said what needed to be said. They were on their own now, and they knew it. They moved out not quietly. The day they left, I got 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 long text from my mom that read like a Catholic guilt sermon. She said they were going through a crisis, living out of boxes, and that it was a disgrace for a son to shame his own blood like this. They ended up in a small 2-bedroom rental in a not-so-great part of town. Steve had to co-sign. I didn't even have to confirm that. My niece mentioned it in passing when she came by with Madison one afternoon. Apparently, it was the topic of every whispered family conversation. Now, I didn't respond, not to the calls, not to the texts, not even when Steve left a voicemail that started calm and ended with him yelling about how I was tearing the family apart. What they didn't know was that I wasn't done. See, I'm not petty, but I am precise and I don't forget. When Dad lost his job, I helped him restructure some finances. I let him register one of his side businesses under my LLC for tax purposes. It was a technical favor just on paper, but it gave me full controlling interest. I hadn't touched it. Not until now. The business was mostly dormant. A small handyman service he kept for under-the-table cash work. Nothing big, but he'd kept it alive, probably out of pride. Still had his name on flyers around town. Still had regulars who trusted him. That changed with 1 email. I shut it down, revoked access to the license, pulled the website, contacted the bank to freeze the account for review. I even posted a notice on the front page of the site, closed until further notice. All inquiries may be directed to Franklin. He found out 2 days later. He showed up at my office, red-faced, shouting before he even got through the lobby. Security didn't need much prompting to escort him out. He left claw marks on the glass door. By the time he made it back to their rental, the water heater had gone out. The landlord wasn't responding. The place had a roach problem, and my mother had apparently spent her first night crying in the bathtub because it reminded her of where she grew up. Karma, I guess. Steve called again. He wanted to broke her peace. Said it was time to stop being childish and restore order. I told him there was no war to stop, just consequences they never thought would come. Then came the final act. Madison had a school project, an interview with a family member about legacy and values. She asked if I'd let her record me. She opened with a question I'll never forget. What's the difference between respect and obligation? I told her, oblation is doing things because someone tells you have to. Respect is earned and it can be lost. She nodded, turned off the recorder and said, then I don't owe them anything. Neither do I. Steve always thought he could fix anything. In his head, he was the reasonable one. The bridge between our parents' arrogance and my so-called emotional outbursts. That was his narrative. That I overreacted, that I held grudges, that he had to keep the family together because I was always looking for a reason to pull away. What he never understood was that I'd already been pushed out a long time ago. The night of Madison's birthday was just the first time I chose not to come back. After the steakhouse dinner fell apart, things got quiet, suspiciously quiet. Then the slow unraveling began. I started hearing from people on the edges. My dad's old friend, Barry, who still came into my store sometimes. He'd chat me up at the register and drop things like, hey, I heard your folks moved into that place over on Milton. Not exactly what they're used to. Huh. Then he'd pause and add something like, between you and me, they're saying you kicked them out because you're jealous of Steve's boys. Jealous. I couldn't stop laughing. Barry didn't know what to do with that reaction, but honestly, it felt good. After years of playing the beautiful son while they fawned over their precious grandsons, I was finally the villain in their story. It was refreshing, but it wasn't just talk anymore. The cracks were spreading fast. Steve had co-signed on their lease. That came with more strings than he realized. Suddenly, he was fielding late-night calls from my mom about the fridge not working, about the heat being too weak, about the neighbor's dog barking too much. He wasn't just their son anymore. He was their landlord, their handyman, and their emotional support hotline. His wife, Rachel, was livid. I heard from someone in her book club that she'd had to cancel a family trip because of the added expenses. They'd started dipping into savings to cover groceries for 5 people instead of 4. And my dad, still too proud to get a part-time job, too exhausted to do anything physical. He sat at home all day watching TV in a room that smelled like mildew. Then came Jake's birthday. We weren't invited. No surprise there. But the fallout reached me anyway. Turns out, during the party, my mom made one of her classic comments. This time aimed straight at Rachel. Something about how some women aren't raised to take care of family only themselves. Rachel lost it in front of everyone, yelled back, told her to start paying rent or shut up. My dad stood up and told Rachel she was being disrespectful. Steve tried to mediate but ended up getting screamed at by both sides. They left in separate cars. Steve's family didn't even go back for the leftovers. By the end of the week, Steve called me again. Left a voicemail practically begging. We need to talk. This has gone too far. They're falling apart. Frank, we can't keep doing this. Just let's talk. I deleted it. Then came the day my dad called. I was at work doing inventory. His number popped up and for once I answered. Maybe I just wanted to hear what excuse he'd come up with next. But he didn't make one. He cried, not screamed, not accused. He cried. It was low, uneven, and real. He said he didn't know what to do anymore. That things were worse than I could imagine. That they'd hit a wall. It was the first time I'd ever heard him sound human. And I didn't say a word. I let the silence stretch, just breathing on the other end of the line. He waited for me to say something. I hung up. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clean. That night, Madison and I ate dinner in the living room watching a movie. She was curled up with her sketch pad, occasionally glancing at the screen, but mostly lost in whatever she was drawing. She looked up at me halfway through and said, You seem lighter. I told her I was because they'd finally run out of ways to control me. The invitation came in the mail this time. A real paper envelope like it was a wedding. Inside was a folded cream card with gold lettering. My mother's handwriting on the front for Franklin and Madison. Please come. It was for a family reconciliation dinner. They'd booked a private room at a country club. I could already picture the performance. Linen napkins, fake smiles, forced laughter, the works. And of course, Steve's name was on it, too. I could practically see his fingerprints on the whole setup. He probably thought if he got everyone in a room again, I'd cave. That we'd have some tearful toast. I'd hand over another check and they'd all go back to pretending none of this happened. I wasn't gonna go, but Madison asked if we could. She said, I just want to hear what they'll say when they think they still have a shot. So we went. The room was decked out. White tablecloths, polished silverware, soft jazz in the background. Steve's kids were all wearing matching dress shirts. My parents looked like they borrowed their outfits from a catalog shoot. Even Rachel had put on a polite face, though I noticed she kept checking her phone like she'd rather be anywhere else. We were the last ones to arrive. They stood up when we walked in like we were guests of honor. I didn't sit right away. I just looked around the table and waited for someone to break. My dad tried first. We've been doing a lot of thinking, he said. And we realized maybe we didn't always treat everyone equally. My mom jumped in next, nodding like a bobblehead. We want to make things right. We're a family. That means something. Steve cleared his throat like he was about to deliver the big closing argument. I know things got out of hand, but we're all struggling in our own way. We just need to start fresh. Can't we do that? Madison looked at me, then stood up. Everyone froze. She wasn't dramatic. She just started talking. You ignored me. You talked over me. You forgot me on my birthday. You didn't forget my name. You just didn't care. And now you're only pretending to care because he stopped helping you. She looked around at all of them. You're not sorry. You're just desperate. No one said anything. Not a breath. Even Steve's youngest stopped fidgeting. Then I spoke. I gave you 8 months. Rent-free, food, gas, money, bills, all of it. And not once did you say thank you. Not once did you make my daughter feel like she mattered. You've lived off me for long enough. This dinner isn't going to undo anything. Steve tried to interrupt. I kept going. You think this is harsh? You should have thought of that before toasting other people's kids at my daughter's birthday. My dad leaned forward like he was going to launch into some big defense. I stood up. You've burned the bridge. You can live with the smoke. And then we left. In the parking lot, Madison laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Just relieved, she said. I think they finally got it. I think they did too. 3 weeks passed. I didn't hear from them. Not my parents, not Steve, nothing. I thought that was it. I thought they'd finally accepted it, that we were done. That there wasn't going to be some last-minute rehearsal or epiphany where I suddenly forgot everything and invited them back into our lives. Then a letter came. It wasn't from them. It was from a law office. They were contesting ownership of the apartment. Apparently, my dad had gone through some dusty old paperwork and convinced himself that there had been a verbal agreement when I bought the place. He was claiming it was a shared family asset and that he was wrongfully evicted. I laughed out loud in my kitchen. They were broke, but they still found money for a lawyer. Desperation does wild things. I called my attorney, who took one look and said, "They're bluffing. This will get tossed before it even hits a courtroom." It did. But the humiliation, that part stuck because their filing became public record and someone at Steve's office found it. Turned out his job had a strict policy about involvement in active legal disputes, especially ones that showed up with your name on them. He wasn't fired, but they pulled him from 2 major projects. His promotion, which had been a lock, disappeared overnight. Then Rachel found out her name was being dragged into the paperwork, too, because she'd been listed as an emergency contact for my parents. She flipped full-on meltdown from what I heard. Took the kids to her sister's place for a few days to think. Meanwhile, my parents were now getting calls from their landlord because I'd sent him a letter, too. Just a copy of their legal filing with a short note. Thought you should be aware of the kind of tenants you've got. Their lease wasn't renewed. That's when I got the second call from my dad. He wasn't crying this time. He was furious. But it wasn't the old rage. It was the panic kind. The kind where someone finally realizes they've run out of people to blame. "You're ruining us," he said. "You've made it your mission to destroy your own family." I told him I didn't have to destroy anything. They did it to themselves. After that, Madison and I went away for the weekend. Just the two of us. We drove upstate to a little cabin by a lake. No cell service, no noise. On the second night, we sat on the porch with mugs of hot chocolate wrapped in blankets. She said, "Do you think they'll ever change?" I told her, "No." She nodded. "Then I'm glad we left them behind." Before we went inside, she handed me something. It was a drawing she'd made. Us sitting on that very porch with the stars above us and the trees around. She titled it Peace. Funny thing about revenge, people think it's fire and fury, but sometimes it's just peace. Real quiet, lasting peace. And watching the people who wronged you learn how cold it feels when you stop warming their world. First update, it was almost a month later when the email hit me from someone I'd never met, an old friend of Dad's from way back, calling himself Martin Graves. He'd come across the court documents and reached out. Said he had insight into the whole apartment dispute and what really happened with that verbal agreement. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the signature. M. Graves, trustee of the Franklin Heritage Fund. Heritage Fund. I started digging. Turns out Dad had once partnered with a small group of investors, pensioners, really, to buy the building I'd thought I fully owned. They'd pulled money decades ago before I was born. The plan was for Dad to run the apartments while they rested on the rental income in retirement. Except when I took over Dad's share, I'd gotten the bulk of his rights and paid them their cut. That's when things should have ended. But Martin's email claimed otherwise. That Dad never signed off. That technically a small legal reversion clause meant the building still legally reverted to the fund if Dad tried to relinquish ownership. I didn't believe it was real. Think old real estate trickery. But the intrigue pulled me in. So I called Martin. He sounded wary. Said, "I don't know your dad anymore, but I do know this clause might give them the right to reclaim part of the building. And if you don't act fast, there could be trouble." Trouble? Just when I thought my part was over. Now there was the Heritage Fund poised to sue me or worse, my tenants. I didn't tell Madison. Didn't want her tangled in another wave. Instead, I went silent. I watched my parents' tiny rental situation. I listened to their whispers in public places. I heard them tell neighbors about a missing fortune in the high-rise that someone was hiding. And I realized something. This mafia-style intrigue was exactly what dragged my family down. Not my revenge. This shitty fund, the secrets Dad kept, the old partners now smelling blood in the water. Then came a knock at my door. Plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a single black and white photocopy of my driver's license clipped to a note. "They're not done. Neither are they." No name, no signature, just the cut threat. Was it Dad? One of those pensioners? Someone else? It was enough. I closed the door, locked it twice, and called Martin again. I asked him to meet and bring every scrap of documents he had. If the Heritage Fund was going to surface, then I needed to face it head on. Madison watched me pace. She said nothing. That night, I stayed up mapping out scenarios and I realized I was fighting far more than just family. We weren't in the clear. Not yet. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid.